Hello, my name is Andrea Patino, and the title of my presentation is The Weight of Invisibility, the Effects of Child Brokering on Sibling Relationships. So whenever we are talking about child brokering, the first thing that we have to talk about is brokering, because that is a relatively new term. So brokering refers to translating and or interpreting, and it does include a culture component. When we're talking about translating, we're talking about transferring information from one language into another, but it is typically written and allows the use of different resources and time. So some of the resources could be dictionaries, the internet, other individuals, anything like that. And of course, it does take longer. Versus interpreting, which is also transferring information from one language to another, but that is doing it in the moment, and it does not allow for the use of many resources. So not a lot of times you can't use dictionaries or the internet or anything like that. Both of these, however, do include a culture component. What this means is that the wording may be different and some phrases have to change so that you can attempt to maintain meaning. The phrase lost in translation is exactly what it is. Sometimes when you transfer information from one language to another, you do lose some of that information, whether it be an underlining meaning or an idiom or anything like that. When we're talking about child brokering, I first want to talk about children. Typically, children is anyone from 0 to 18 years old. I will delve into that a little bit later. But whenever we're talking about child brokering, the people for whom these children broker, which brokering again means interpreting and or translating, are typically parents. That's the most common one. They could also broker for siblings or some extended family members such as aunts, uncles, grandparents, anything like that. It could also be family friends, maybe someone they've known for a while, maybe someone their family has known for a while, but it could also mean other individuals, which can be complete strangers. This happens a lot if, for example, an individual sees a family with a child broker, and the child is helping the family deal with something, say at a grocery store, and this individual also needs help with that particular language, so they may approach the family and ask the child to help them, and a lot of the times what happens is the family does allow the child to help because they feel proud that their child can do that. This typically happens in schools for parent-teacher conferences or open houses or any other type of meeting that the parent has to have with school officials. It also happens a lot in hospitals. It could be anything from a cold to blood test results and to figuring out that maybe someone has a very severe or serious disease. It can also happen in job sites. It could be that the parent is trying to look for a job, or maybe something came up in their job and they need to deal with it, but they need their child to help them understand what's happening. It also happens, like I said, in different types of stores. It can happen in banks. Maybe the parent wants to open a bank account, close a bank account, or problems with their bank accounts are happening. Immigration offices, if the parent has to deal with any sort of immigration status difficulties, then they could ask their children to help them broker. It could also happen in courts. Maybe there's a speeding ticket, a parking ticket, anything like that. They bring their child to help them understand what's happening. And so all of this brokering does have serious effects on the child. They can be divided into negative and positive. When we're talking about the negative effects, a lot of it is responsibility. The child feels like they are responsible for what happens to their parents. It is a type of role reversal where the child feels like they have to make sure their parents are doing okay and they're dealing with life okay, and this causes a lot of pressure in children. This causes stress, and they feel like they have to take on this responsibility, and it can lead to resentment towards the parents and any other person that they have to broker for. And this can lead to academic decline because the child is not just focused on their academics at this point, they're focused on what's happening in their parents' life, in their siblings' life, in other family members' lives, and they can't focus on their academics. And something that I like to use to compare this is, say when we were 6 years old and we were at the playground, maybe it was recess or something like that, and we were having a really bad day because our best friend took our cookie, because back then cookies were really, really important. So our best friend took our cookie, and we have a spelling test after recess, and we're just, we're struggling with our spelling test. So we're worried because now we lost a friend, and our spelling test is really stressful. What these children are dealing with is that, plus maybe their parent has to have some blood tests that day, so they have to go try to figure out how to talk to other individuals and how to broker that situation. Maybe their parent has a court date coming up and they have to be ready for that. So they're dealing with a lot more than the other children their age. On the other side, there are some positive effects to child brokering. Because the children are put in these situations where they have to deal with unknown, they become very good at critical thinking, and their language development surpasses that of their peers, because they do have to think about situations that their peers are not put in. In addition, the cultural competency is higher in these children because they can navigate these two cultures, and they learn how to understand both cultures equally. For my particular research, I focused on Latino/Hispanic students, and particularly students in higher education. I focused on Eastern and Central Kentucky, particularly Eastern Kentucky University, Berea College, and the University of Kentucky. So what I did was I sent out a survey in Google Forms. I don't know if a lot of you have worked with Google Forms, but it's very simple to access. You access the link, and then I made the questions be multiple choice. This, of course, encouraged students to send their responses because they didn't have to do a lot of typing. In addition, it was easy for them to navigate because a lot of people are using Google now and all those Google applications, so they are familiar with this. I had 14 questions, and the first part of the questions dealt with demographics, and then the second part dealt with feelings about translation and or interpreting. I sent the survey out to the EKU Latino Student Association, the Berea Latin American Student Association, and the UK Latino Student Union so that I could target the population that I wanted to focus in. The response that I got was from 79 different students from these various institutions, and of course they were all completely anonymous, so I have no clue who sent these responses. A little bit about the results was that some of the students that I did survey had not interpreted or translated for anyone. But out of the students that did, 76.8% said that they wish they didn't have to interpret or translate for their parents at least sometimes. So this means that at least one point in their life, they wish they didn't have to be put in that stressful situation. All of the students that were surveyed did have siblings. This was completely by chance. I did not know that all of the students would have siblings, but it did work out in my favor because that's what I wanted to focus on. So 38.4% of the students who did interpret or translate for their parents mentioned that they would rather their siblings interpret or translate instead of them. So they would rather their siblings be put in that stressful situation than they have to deal with it. 15.9% of them reported having negative feelings when they interpreted or translated more than their siblings, and 15.9% reported having negative feelings when their siblings interpreted or translated more than them. So this can mean a lot of things. It could mean that maybe they feel bad because of the inequality whenever their siblings have to do it or whenever they have to do it. Now, the rest of the students did focus more on neutral, and they just didn't lean towards negative or positive or anything like that. And this could, of course, be because maybe they feel guilty trying to admit anything like that, but of course, we don't truly know what the reasons were. Something that is worth noting is that 61.1% of the students reported having positive or very positive feelings when both they and their siblings had to interpret or translate the same amount. So we can see that the effect on individuals can be based on whether their siblings and them interpret the same or different amounts. We can see that if they and their siblings interpret the same amount, they're more likely to feel more of a support system. The connections with these students and the information is that these students reported that they began translating and interpreting between ages 5 and 20. So like I said, children typically are between ages of 0, of course, and 18. However, for the purpose of my research, I pushed that up to 20, and of course, we can kind of agree that a lot of the times during that 18 to 20 range, they may still be children. So, out of all the students that were surveyed, 73.3% of them were between 5 and 10 years of age whenever they began interpreting or translating. All of this classifies these students as child workers. So the implications on these child workers are that within these negative feelings that they have maybe towards their siblings or even towards themselves because of the disparities in translating and interpreting for family members, they can cause negative feelings within their relationships. Now these children already have to deal with the stress of being children, being child brokers, and now they have these sibling pressures that they are added, and this can disturb their support network. It is really important because this stress deters them from pursuing what they want. They may feel a lack of support, or their support system may be affected negatively, and they may feel like they don't fit in the classrooms. So this can cause them to give up on what they wanted to do. All this responsibility can really get in the way. And it is really important for us to acknowledge this because these people are the ones that we see every day. You may not see that they are a child broker, but they still carry all of that pressure and stress within them. Some of the solutions that I did find within my research is that, of course, it should be implemented that different organizations and offices require trained translators and interpreters. Per the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the thing that must be provided is a meaningful translation and interpretation. This is not clear enough. This means that a lot of institutions or associations or different offices are getting away with it because they don't have a clear idea of what they have to do, so they don't have anything that they have to follow. Another thing that we can do is utilize existing resources. A lot of the times in schools particularly, there are teachers that teach various languages. So why not create a program where you incentivize teachers to become certified as translators and interpreters, and then they could do part-time teaching and part-time interpreting or translating. This would really, really help the students, and it would cause a rise in academics. In addition, it is important that we continue to promote bilingualism within the school so these children don't feel left out because they know both languages. And finally, of course, we have to continue to support the existing child workers. This is really, really important because a lot of the times these children, as they grow up, they do not know what kind of responsibilities they carry that others do not. They don't understand fully what is happening or has happened to them. This information, like I said, is super important because you find these individuals everywhere. They may be adults now, but the fact remains that they were child brokers, and they still carry that with them. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation, and I hope you found it a little bit helpful.